The nursery door had no handle on the inside, but Paloma Rivera barely noticed as she rocked her 3-month-old daughter and listened to Hendersons discussing her future through the baby monitor they didn't know she'd discovered. Her daughter Sofia would be raised as their biological child. They were saying, while Paloma would remain in the house as a permanent domestic servant and sexual companion for Mr. Henderson whenever his wife traveled for business. The surrogacy contract she'd signed in Honduras had been just the beginning of a trap that closed around both mother and child the moment she'd given birth on American soil. 6 months earlier, everything had seemed like a miracle answering her most desperate prayers. Paloma had been working in a textile factory in Tegucigalpa, earning wages that couldn't support her unemployed husband and sick mother, while she struggled with pregnancy complications that required medical care she couldn't afford. When the representative from Blessed Beginnings Adoption Agency approached her with an offer to carry a child for an American family, the financial terms were generous enough to transform her family's circumstances completely. The agency specialized in international surrogacy arrangements that helped infertile American couples while providing economic opportunities for women in Central America. Paloma would receive $30,000 for carrying a child to term, with all medical expenses covered and additional compensation for travel and living expenses during the pregnancy. The money would fund her mother's surgery, support her family for years, and provide security they'd never known. Jennifer Martinez, the agency coordinator, was warm and professional during their initial meetings. She explained how the intended parents, Robert and Susan Henderson, had struggled with infertility for 8 years and were desperate to become parents through surrogacy. The Hendersons were successful professionals who would provide their child with every advantage, while Paloma would receive compensation that would change her family's economic trajectory permanently. The legal documentation was impressive and apparently comprehensive. Contracts specified exactly what medical care Paloma would receive, where she would live during the pregnancy, and how the birth would be handled in Arizona, where the Hendersons resided. Everything was designed to protect both the surrogate mother and the intended parents, while ensuring the child would be born into a loving, financially secure family. The Hendersons themselves seemed perfect during their video calls. Robert was a successful businessman who spoke passable Spanish and showed genuine interest in Paloma's well-being. Susan appeared maternal and caring, discussing plans in nursery and expressing gratitude for Paloma's willingness to help them achieve their dream of parenthood. They promised to honor her sacrifice and maintain contact, so the child would know about the woman who'd made their family possible. The visa process was handled entirely by the agency's legal team, who explained that surrogacy participants received special documentation that allowed them to travel to America for medical purposes. The paperwork was complex but professionally managed, with agency representatives handling every aspect of immigration compliance. Paloma's role was simply to maintain her health and prepare for the journey to Arizona. The first trimester in Honduras was carefully monitored by doctors working with the agency. Regular checkups confirmed the pregnancy was progressing normally, while nutritional supplements and prenatal vitamins ensured optimal fetal development. Jennifer visited monthly to provide support and answer questions, maintaining the personal touch that made the arrangement feel like a partnership rather than a business transaction. The journey to America felt like stepping into a future she'd only imagined during her most optimistic moments. The Hendersons met her at Phoenix Airport with flowers and warm embraces, immediately making her feel welcome in their home. During the drive through affluent Arizona neighborhoods, they pointed out local attractions and explained how comfortable they wanted her to feel during her stay. The Henderson house was more luxurious than anything Paloma had ever experienced. Located in a gated community north of Phoenix, it featured a swimming pool, manicured gardens, and amenities that spoke of serious wealth. Her bedroom was in a private wing of the house, beautifully decorated and equipped with everything she might need during the remaining months of pregnancy. The medical care exceeded every expectation she'd held about American health care. Dr. Patricia Williams, the obstetrician handling her pregnancy, was attentive and thorough, conducting tests and examinations that ensured both maternal and fetal health. The medical facility was state-of-the-art, with equipment and capabilities that would have been impossible to access in Honduras even for wealthy families. The second trimester passed comfortably as Paloma settled into routines that balanced rest, exercise, and prenatal care. The Hendersons were attentive hosts, ensuring she had everything needed for a healthy pregnancy while respecting her privacy and autonomy. Susan often joined her for doctor visits, while Robert handled practical matters like transportation and communication with the agency. But subtle changes in the Hendersons' behavior began appearing as the pregnancy progressed. Their questions became more invasive, focusing on her family situation in Honduras, her relationships, and her plans after the birth. When Paloma mentioned missing her husband and looking forward to returning home, their responses seemed strained, as if her departure wasn't part of their expectations. The legal documentation that had seemed so comprehensive began revealing gaps and ambiguities when Paloma tried to understand her rights and obligations. The contracts were written in complex legal language that was difficult to parse, even with translation assistance. When she asked for clarification about specific provisions, the agency representatives became evasive, suggesting she focus on her health rather than legal technicalities. Dr. Williams' examination procedures became increasingly uncomfortable and invasive as the pregnancy advanced. Tests that seemed medically unnecessary were conducted regularly, while Paloma's questions about their purpose received vague explanations about ensuring optimal outcomes. The medical attention felt less like healthcare and more like monitoring, as if she was being evaluated for purposes beyond pregnancy management. The third trimester brought new restrictions disguised as medical precautions. Paloma was discouraged from leaving the house without supervision, ostensibly to prevent accidents that might endanger the pregnancy. Her phone was replaced with a new device that had limited functionality, supposedly to reduce stress and electromagnetic exposure. Communication with her family became increasingly difficult as technical problems multiplied. The birth itself occurred in a private room at an exclusive medical facility where the Hendersons had arranged for complete privacy. Labor was induced slightly early, though Dr. Williams claimed this was medically necessary despite Paloma's lack of complications. The delivery proceeded normally, resulting in a healthy daughter who was immediately handed to Susan Henderson, while Paloma recovered from sedation she didn't remember requesting. The postpartum period revealed the true nature of the arrangement when Paloma discovered that her return journey to Honduras was indefinitely postponed. The agency claimed there were complications with her documentation that required resolution before she could travel internationally. The Hendersons suggested she remain as their guest while these issues were addressed, though their hospitality felt increasingly like supervision. The baby, whom the Hendersons named Sofia, was kept in a nursery that Paloma could access only with supervision. When she expressed confusion about the limited contact with her daughter, Susan explained that establishing the parent-child bond required minimizing interaction with the surrogate mother. The medical justification sounded plausible but felt psychologically cruel to a woman who'd carried the child for 9 months. The nursery security features became apparent when Paloma discovered the door could only be opened from the outside, and surveillance cameras monitored all interactions with the baby. When she questioned these measures, Robert claimed they were standard precautions to protect valuable equipment and ensure the child's safety. The explanations were reasonable, but didn't address her growing sense that she was being treated more like a threat than a guest. The revelation came accidentally when Paloma found contracts hidden in Robert's study that revealed the true scope of the arrangement. The surrogacy agreement was just the initial phase of a plan that included permanent retention of both mother and child. The document specified that Paloma would remain in the household as domestic help and sexual companion, while Sofia would be raised as a Henderson's biological daughter with no knowledge of her actual parentage. The legal framework supporting this arrangement was sophisticated and apparently airtight. Paloma's visa status made her completely dependent on the Hendersons for her right to remain in America, while attempting to return to Honduras would result in permanent separation from her daughter. The birth certificate listed the Hendersons as Sofia's parents, making any custody claims extremely difficult to pursue through American legal systems. The threats against her compliance were subtle but unmistakable. Robert explained that any attempt to contact authorities or breach their agreement would result in her deportation as an illegal alien who'd violated the terms of her medical visa. Sofia would remain in America with her legal parents, while Paloma would return to Honduras with no rights, no money, and no possibility of reunion with her daughter. The domestic duties imposed on Paloma extended far beyond household maintenance to include personal services for Robert whenever Susan traveled for business. These expectations were presented as reasonable compensation for the room and board she received while living in their home. Her resistance was met with reminders about her precarious legal status and the ease with which she could be separated from Sofia permanently. The house that had once seemed like luxury accommodation revealed itself as a sophisticated prison designed to maintain compliance through psychological rather than physical restraint. The gated community provided isolation from potential help, while the affluent neighborhood offered no resources for undocumented immigrants seeking assistance. Every aspect of her environment had been chosen to maximize her dependency and minimize her options. The baby monitor in the nursery was a two-way communication device that allowed the Hendersons to listen to Paloma's interactions with Sofia, ensuring no unauthorized bonding occurred that might complicate their family dynamic. Her maternal instincts were systematically suppressed through limited access and constant supervision, while Sofia was encouraged to bond primarily with Susan through exclusive feeding and care responsibilities. The other household staff were temporary workers who rotated regularly, preventing Paloma from forming relationships that might provide support or assistance. When she attempted to communicate with housekeepers about her situation, language barriers and their obvious fear of the Hendersons made meaningful connection impossible. Her isolation was complete and carefully maintained. The agency that had recruited her disappeared entirely after birth, with Jennifer Martinez no longer responding to calls or emails. The phone numbers provided for emergencies were disconnected, and the office address in Honduras led to an empty building. Blessed Beginnings Adoption Agency had been a sophisticated front for human trafficking that specialized in exploiting pregnant women's vulnerabilities and legal complexities. The medical care that seemed so comprehensive during pregnancy was revealed as monitoring rather than health care. Dr. Williams had been documenting Paloma's physical and psychological condition to ensure she would be suitable for long-term retention, rather than providing standard obstetric care. The frequent examinations had been assessing her value as a domestic and sexual servant rather than protecting her health. The surrogacy industry's legal gray areas provided perfect cover for trafficking operations that could exploit women's reproductive capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability about their criminal activities. The Hendersons operated within a network of corrupt professionals who used legitimate-sounding services to facilitate human trafficking disguised as reproductive assistance. Sofia's birth certificate, citizenship, and legal identity had been established through fraudulent means that would be extremely difficult to challenge through conventional legal channels. The child was legally American and legally the Hendersons' daughter, despite the biological reality. Paloma's maternal rights had been systematically eliminated through paperwork that she'd signed without understanding its full implications. The financial promises that had originally attracted Paloma to the arrangement were revealed as entirely fictional. No money would be paid, since compliant victims couldn't effectively demand compensation or report fraud. The $30,000 existed only as bait to attract women who might otherwise be suspicious of offers that seemed too generous to be legitimate. The psychological manipulation extended to every aspect of her daily routine. Paloma was required to call the Hendersons sir and ma'am to express gratitude for their generosity in allowing her to remain near her daughter and to perform sexual services with apparent enthusiasm rather than mere compliance. The performance of contentment was enforced through threats of immediate separation from Sofia. The neighborhood's affluence provided additional security for the Hendersons' operation. Local law enforcement would be naturally skeptical of complaints from undocumented immigrants against wealthy, respectable citizens. Even if Paloma managed to contact authorities, her legal status and the apparent legitimacy of the surrogacy arrangement would make her claims difficult to believe or investigate. The baby's American citizenship created additional complications for any potential rescue efforts. Sofia was legally entitled to remain in America with her legal parents, while Paloma's deportation would be easily justified through immigration violations. The separation of mother and child would be enforced by the same legal systems that were supposed to protect family integrity. Robert's sexual demands escalated in frequency and degradation as Paloma's resistance diminished through psychological conditioning. Her compliance was monitored through hidden cameras that documented her apparent willingness to participate in activities that would be impossible to explain if she ever attempted to seek help. The recordings served both as leverage and as protection for Robert against potential accusations. The routine of domestic servitude was designed to occupy Paloma's time while preventing her from developing independence or planning escape attempts. Every moment was scheduled and supervised, from childcare duties performed under observation to household cleaning that kept her isolated from potential outside contacts. The busy schedule created exhaustion that made resistance more difficult to sustain. Susan's travel schedule was carefully coordinated to maximize Robert's access to Paloma while maintaining the appearance of a normal marriage. When neighbors or associates visited, Paloma was presented as a grateful domestic worker who'd been rescued from poverty through the Hendersons' generosity. The performance was enforced through threats against Sofia's well-being and Paloma's legal status. The baby's development was used as additional leverage to ensure Paloma's compliance. Any behavior that Robert deemed inappropriate was blamed for potentially damaging Sofia's psychological development. The child's need for stability was weaponized against the mother's instincts to protect her daughter, creating impossible choices between immediate resistance and long-term welfare. The surrogacy network that had recruited Paloma operated similar operations throughout the southwestern United States, targeting pregnant women in Central America who were desperate enough to trust reproductive assistance programs. The legal complexities of international surrogacy provided perfect cover for trafficking operations that could operate openly while maintaining complete protection from law enforcement. The house's security features were disguised as luxury amenities and child safety measures. Electronic locks required codes that only the Hendersons knew, while surveillance cameras monitored all areas where Paloma might have unsupervised access to communication devices or potential escape routes. The gated community's private security force provided additional monitoring disguised as neighborhood protection. Sofia's presence served as the ultimate guarantee of Paloma's compliance. Any attempt to escape would mean abandoning her daughter to people who viewed children as property and mothers as disposable servants. The maternal bond that had originally motivated Paloma to seek surrogacy income was now being used to ensure her permanent enslavement. The legal documentation supporting the Hendersons' custody was sophisticated enough to withstand challenges from conventional advocacy organizations. Even if Paloma somehow managed to contact immigration attorneys or family rights groups, proving her case would require resources and legal standing she didn't possess. The system was designed to protect legal parents against false claims from biological mothers seeking to reclaim children. The psychological damage of forced separation from her daughter was compounded by being required to witness Sofia's development while being prevented from participating meaningfully in her care. Paloma could see her child but couldn't mother her, creating a form of psychological torture that was more effective than physical restraint in maintaining compliance. The house's isolation in an affluent neighborhood meant that screaming or obvious distress would be attributed to domestic disputes rather than trafficking situations. The Hendersons' social standing and apparent respectability provided protection against suspicion, while Paloma's undocumented status made her automatically less credible if she attempted to seek help. Robert's business associates occasionally visited the house and were offered access to Paloma as part of professional entertainment, though these encounters were framed as consensual arrangements between adults rather than commercial sexual exploitation. The normalization of her availability served both to generate additional income and to implicate influential community members in the operation. The baby monitor's discovery had been accidental, hidden behind a picture frame, when Paloma was cleaning the nursery. The conversation she'd overheard revealed long-term plans that extended years into the future, with Sofia's education, social development, and eventual marriage all planned by people who viewed her as their creation rather than their daughter. The ultimate goal of the operation was creating a perfect American family through the acquisition of both child and mother as permanent property. Sofia would grow up believing Susan was her biological mother, while Paloma would age into a servant role that became increasingly invisible as the child developed independent relationships. The long-term nature of the plan revealed the sophisticated thinking behind human trafficking operations that prioritized control over immediate profit. The nursery where Paloma now sat with her daughter contained all the equipment needed for child development, but none of the legal or emotional recognition that would allow her to function as Sofia's mother. The beautiful room was both a symbol of everything she'd hoped to provide for a child and a prison that separated them despite their physical proximity. As she rocked Sofia and listened to the Hendersons planning their future, Paloma realized that the door handle was missing for the same reason the baby monitor was hidden and the surveillance cameras were disguised as security measures. Every aspect of their environment had been designed by people who understood exactly how to use a mother's love for a child as a weapon against both of them, ensuring that the American dream of providing a better life will become a nightmare of permanent separation disguised as family formation.